Before we get started, I want to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by the 80s Cruise. It is coming back. It's going to be February 27th to March 6th of 2026.
Your memories that you brought back, I had full-on FOMO, so I'm really looking forward to this one.
Well, one of the reasons I loved it was, besides seeing these great 80s bands, I got to go to different places in the world that I never would have gone to. When I stopped in the Bahamas, I saw this amphitheater. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. What a nice place for a show. Turns out the 80s Cruise people also thought that. So there's going to be a show outside of the cruise this year, and it's going to feature Nile Rodgers and Chic, Billy Ocean, and Donnie Iris and the Cruisers. And it's called Rocks the Dock, which makes sense. Everyone starts their journey to the Bahamas and gets to hear these amazing bands.
Yeah, which sounds amazing, but can we also mention some of the other bands that are going to be performing on board in what you call the small amphitheater style, which sounds so cool? Bret Michaels, the lead singer of Poison, and I haven't seen Poison since the 80s. OMD, Gary Newman, Heaven 17, Berlin, Terry Nunn Rocks. This is a fabulous lineup.
Go to the80scruise.com to get all the info, and then when you're ready to sign up, enter the promo code WDDIM, which stands for What Difference Does It Make? As you all know, you can get $250 in onboard credit if this is your first time on the cruise. So 1 credit per cabin, and the offer is only available to first-time guests for the 2026 80s Cruise. But it is going to be such a great time, great artists, and some of our favorite MTV VJs will be there. So we hope to see you there. Remember, all the information is at the80scruise.com, and WDDIM is the promo code, which stands for What Difference Does It Make?
Get your mother-loving ears on because your big-time radio DJ's got news. PayPal lets you choose how you want to pay for all the stuff. With PayPal, I can pay in-store, pay online, or pay over time. What's that? You want this translated into song? I hope you're sitting down. You can pay your own way. You keep those ears on, you hear? Don't just pay, baby. PayPal.
Learn more at paypal.com.
Oh, Hilton stay, your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. Enjoy comfortable rooms and friendly service when you stay with Hilton instead. Save up to 25% this season when you book with Hilton. Hilton for the stay. Terms apply.
Hello, Holly.
Hello, Dave.
How are you? Happy holidays to you. The time has come. Here we are. It's our Black Friday episode.
Happy Record Store Day to you.
It is Record Store Day as we publish on this day. It is a religious holiday.
Have you picked out anything to buy yet?
There's Wilco, of course, has something coming out. They always have something. Bob Dylan, Freewheelin'. There's a Joni Mitchell, Rolling Thunder that I got my eyes on, and Ween, of course, Shinola, possibly. So we'll see. We'll see what I get. I'll be waiting in line at my local record store, Freak Beat, or you can go to the Lindsay Parker sponsored Licorice Pizza.
That might be a good one. How about there's a Van Halen live at Wembley from 1995. There's a Billy Idol and In Excess.
All right. Well, I guess you're going to be waiting in line for those.
Yeah, not much of a line waiter, even on Record Store Day.
I like waiting in line, talking to the people. I get to do my puzzles. I could do my Wordles and my spelling bees and all that fun stuff.
Maybe I'll just give you my list.
No, sorry. Got to wait in line.
Yeah. So why are we here today?
We're talking to Paul Myers, who is Record Store Day ambassador forever. He's the mayor. They always have a Record Store Day ambassador. This is Black Friday, so I don't think they have an ambassador for Black Friday. But Paul Myers is the mayor of Record Store Day, is what we'll declare him.
He is the perfect ambassador for Record Store Day, and he is the host and producer and writer of the Record Store Day podcast, which always has great guests.
Yeah.
However, the main reason we're talking to him today is because he has a new book. He has a biography on John Candy called A Life in Comedy. And if I do say so myself, and I do, it's a fabulous book. If you're into comedy, sketch comedy, John Candy, the SCTV guys, SNL guys, this is the book for you. I loved reading the stories.
As you know, come Thanksgiving time, which we're at, I always pop in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and it always destroys me. I laugh and I cry. I get all the emotions. Thanks to John Candy.
That film is a masterpiece. And I know we have talked about this before, you and I. We always knew who John Candy was. He was always in our world because we were fans, comedy fans always. And I know you're a big SCTV fan. And I always remember being in my house when I was young. My parents were into it. And so we knew John Candy because he was just always there. But I didn't know enough about him at the time so that when the very first time I saw Planes, Trains, and Automobiles when it was released, I wasn't expecting the heavy part of it. With Steve Martin and John Candy, you just expect a full-on comedy. It was so much more than that. I appreciate it so much more now. I haven't watched it that recently, but maybe I'll do some Thanksgiving viewing too. Did you feel that way when you saw it the very first time?
I knew it was a John Hughes. John likes to pull the heartstrings. There's always something that he liked to sneak in there. There was always a message in his movies. And John Candy were a perfect couple together, as I've learned in the book, that they really bonded both on screen and off. Yeah, so just a tidbit that I learned from this book from Paul Myers, and it is out now.
He's a great speaker, and he's a great podcast guest, and I was very excited to talk to him again.
Yeah, again, he's returned.
Two-timer.
I think we could call him a friend of the show. I mean, if you're on the podcast, you're a friend of the show, but he's a super friend. He's one of the super friends.
Yes.
Super Canadian friend. All right, so we're talking with Paul, and we've got some social media things that we've got brewing. What do we have a brewing on there?
You will find outtakes from this chat with Paul at WDDIM Podcast and on YouTube at What Difference Does It Make Podcast and on TikTok.
We did have some fun with Paul Myers. So why don't we get into our talk? This is Paul Myers. He wrote a book. It's about John Candy.
It is called John Candy, A Life in Comedy.
And Paul Myers is on the What Difference Does It Make podcast. Hi, Paul Myers. How are you? Welcome aboard.
I'm good. Good to see you guys. I love the Tim Hortons sweatshirt.
I mean, mad respect. I got to give props. I wasn't going to wear a Dodger t-shirt for sure. Come on. I can't.
My little concession to Canada is I'm wearing a CBC radio t-shirt or CBC television, actually.
Oh, nice. Tell me about CBC, first of all, because is it like BBC? How does this network
I guess it's like BBC meets NPR, but it's also, they show sitcoms from the States as well as Canadian-made sitcoms and variety shows just like you would have. They don't really have a late-night TV world the same way. They do have TV on at night, but they don't have like a Letterman or what's contemporary ones, Seth Meyers or Jimmy Kimmel. They don't have
Colbert.
They basically
they're all disappearing anyway.
Colbert. There's another network in Canada called CTV that actually runs things like Colbert, and they just run it for Canada. It's just the same show. I'm in Berkeley, California now, by the way, just so you know. But I speak about we when I say Canadians.
Sure,
because
as you should.
Especially these days, I feel very Canadian.
Yeah.
I think it's better to feel Canadian these days.
Are you still Canadian nationalist?
Yeah, I'm a dual citizen. I grew up in Toronto and I lived there for most of my life. But then in my 30s, I started living in California on green cards and stuff like that, working here. And then my wife and I both are from Canada. We both got green cards. And then when we came back in 2006 to California again, this time she had a job offer. My wife had a job offer that was offering to do full citizenship, like pay the legal fees involved. And so we did it because we wanted to be able to vote. And God, I love doing jury duty. No, but we wanted to be able to have an active participation in this Northern California place that I live. I live in roughly North Berkeley. And so we did that. But yeah, so I'm a dual citizen. And the reason I mention that is that besides having my book, John Candy, A Life in Comedy, come out, around the same time, a book came out in Canada. So there's a book called Elbows Up, which is a collection of essays. And they asked different people to write essays about the Canadian experience. And I chose to write, I think I made this term up, the Canadiafornian. And the Canadiafornian is basically me, and it's basically about what it's like to feel representation as a Californian, but also as a Canadian. Probably Canadian first, but then when people say, "Are you American?" I go, "Well, I'm Californian." I feel very much proud when I see the Golden Bear flag and the California Republic flag. I feel that's my flag now, and I feel proud when our state, does things cool, and frustrated when we don't.
Yeah.
So I feel a sense of we about California that I'm proud of, but I will never lose my Canadianness. So the Canadiafornian is an essay that's in this book that's also a bestseller in Canada right now. So it's kind of a nice time to be affirmed for who you actually are.
Look at you.
So I'm curious, upon the release of this book, when was it released, this book of essays?
The book of essays came out like 7 days after the John Candy book came out. So my book came out October 7th, my John Candy, A Life in Comedy. And then on October 14th, the Elbows Up book came out. And I did an event in Calgary where one night I was talking about my book and another night I was on a panel for that book. So yeah, this was the Calgary Word Fest. It was like kind of an amazing confluence of things,
Go ahead and explain Elbows Up.
Elbows Up. Okay, so here's the thing. Yeah, my brother, inescapable, Mike Myers, my brother. He is also somebody, he's not a Canadian-fornian, but he's a dual citizen in the East Coast of the United States. And his kids are American and his wife is American, but he's maintained a Canadian flag consciousness in his households wherever he is. When Trump went after Canada and made the very insulting comment about it being just the 51st state, a lot of us were very like, hey, back off, you don't poke the bear. So Mike happened to be on TV and remembered something the hockey player Gordie Howe used to do. He was known for having his elbows up in the corners because when somebody's threatening you, it's both a defensive posture and slightly aggressive posture. But it's mainly when someone's threatening you and they're coming at you, you stick your elbow out, because then they'll get pain for trying, And so Mike wanted to sort of rally it in a very hockey way. He said on TV, he had a T-shirt that said Canada is not for sale, for one thing, to put the nail right on the head. But then he kind of did the elbows up gesture and it resonated, man. It was like so funny, like in Canada overnight.
Yeah.
People started, and even like Margaret Atwood is now using the term elbows up. She's in the book I'm in. She's in the same compilation that I'm in. I'm in a book with Margaret Atwood.
Nice.
Like, it's kind of crazy how that happened. And independently, I'd written this essay, and then they called the book Elbows Up. So it's kind of funny. They get 2 Myers hits for one in this book, But I was really proud of Mike for doing that, by the way. A lot of Canadians were. It's a very unifying gesture for Canadians. Now, we don't like to hate Americans because we don't hate Americans. Obviously, I live and work in California. But what we don't want is somebody to just insult us. It's like an ethnic heritage, Best expressed through, do you remember Bugs Bunny cartoons?
Of course.
Bugs Bunny, there's an episode where Bugs Bunny finds out that the bounty on bunny rabbits is $2 because bunnies are harmless little creatures who would never hurt anyone. So he says, harmless, eh? And he goes after and he buys a tank.
Yeah.
He wants to prove that bunny rabbits can have a lot of dignity and self-determination and agency. So I think that's what happens. I mean, I love making cartoon analogies. I live my life by the Fred Flintstone credo, but that's kind of what's happening there. So we don't want to be anti-American, but we just don't want to let us get paved over either,
You're doing the world tour. You're jumping all over the place. And you're getting some fabulous guests. For John Candy, you're doing, I've noticed you've gotten Ryan Reynolds and some other Canadians. I don't know.
So Ryan Reynolds flew me out to Boston to talk on stage about John Candy with another friend of mine, Stephen Page from Barenaked Ladies, who was the subject of my very first book. So it's a beautiful moment. And Ryan and I were just texting yesterday, and I was like, wow, who knew that in 2025, Ryan Reynolds would be on my text Rolodex? It's just kind of a weird confluence of things. But it also has to do with John Candy. Let's be honest. Yeah. By writing a book about John Candy, I've opened a whole portal to a symbol of fairness and compassion and empathy. It's bigger than my ego or whether Ryan Reynolds and I are texting. I think we're texting about John, so it's kind of cool.
It actually seems like a perfect time for the world to hear more about John Candy.
Yeah, I think you're right. Again, I've made reference to the current administration in the United States. And then, again, I don't want it to be a hugely political thing, but what some people have done in power have made empathy and compassion bad things. They portrayed them as bad things, anti-woke concepts and things like that. But when you look at the reign of cruelty that is constantly being affirmed by a certain party, the antidote to that is to generate compassion, kindness, and just a kind of dignity. Joy is a form of rebellion, and comedy can often be an act of resistance. And I think that, again, that's as political as you need to make it. But really, in practice, that means just love everybody and see each other, give agency to people or let people have agency. You're not giving it to them. And then John Candy was this guy who did that. So 31 years ago, he passed away. But, we're still remembering him because he was a guy who really did stand up for everybody, including himself, and made us laugh. But he also touched people because he had, I mean, use a heavy term, but emotional intelligence. He was a great actor with emotional intelligence who also did great comedy. And what a fascinating person to spend 3.5 years researching and interviewing people about. And so now I get to go out and talk about it all the time, and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I need to model the basic tenets of John Candyism, if you will. Not to start a religion here, but but I'm kind of honoring the man by trying to live more like him in some ways, like just to be nicer to people, you know? And so how much fun is that to go around talking about? So I'm having a good time.
You know what? All you need to do is Mambo. Just Mambo, you know, Mr. Mambo. I've been watching all these things. And then there is a thing like he's like, you're down in the dumps and like the end of an episode. And so it's like, all you need to do is just Mambo. And then it was like 5 minutes of a song and just John Candy dancing and doing Mambo around. Most joyful thing I've ever seen. It was just amazing.
And that was from a show called Big City Comedy that he made on his own when he left SCTV for one season to try and to do his own show. And he wasn't allowed to bring certain characters from SCTV like Johnny LaRue. So he came up with Mr. Mambo. And Mr. Mambo was doing exactly what you just said. And Mr. Mambo became kind of a staple of John Candy's whole world. And I think he brought the character into some of his other roles. Like if you look at Who's Harry Crumb, which is a film where he played a detective who does a lot of different disguises. He doesn't do Mr. Mambo strictly, but he has a character that's like Mr. Mambo. It's been, like I said, fun to discover all these characters, that some of which I hadn't really paid much attention to over the years. And the Mambo thing, you're right. I hadn't even made the connection, Dave, that the idea of that it is a symbol of, it's sort of like always look on the bright side of life is to Python.
Exactly.
You know, like Eric Idle, literally a guy on the cross singing, always look on the bright side of life. When life seems jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten. Like there's another line, life's a piece of shit if you look at it. But then he says, but you should have a laugh while you're here and always look on the bright side of life, you know? And I think that song, John Candy, I know that he loved Python. He loved Graham Chapman from Python almost worked with him a couple of times. There's a scene in the book where Candy goes over to his flat in London and has a late night party dinner with him, and all mayhem ensues, but they never really decided on what to do together. But he was a huge fan of Python, obviously, as any sketch comedy person would have been.
What prompted you to write about John Candy, and how much did you know, and did your paths ever cross?
Okay, there's several questions there. I will take them. It can be best answered in the form of a mime.
Yeah, exactly.
An interpretive dance.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's the Mambo. But here, okay, first to answer the first question, I wrote a book about the Canadian sketch comedy troupe, The Kids in the Hall, who are more of a cult thing, but they're well known if you like comedy, you tend to know The Kids in the Hall. And they were in many ways as innovative as Python, and again, proud homeboys of Toronto, Canada.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that book, and it did fairly well with what we call a niche audience, I guess. But it did fairly well. Like it sold through, as they say, which is good, which means it earned out its advance, which is more than some of the books I've written. So what happened was the publisher of that was House of Anansi Press in Toronto. And they said, what do you want to do next? And I thought, well, I'm still in a sketch comedy mood. And I'd been talking in the book before about Kids in the Hall the way was paved for the Kids in the Hall because of Second City Television, which was a sketch show from Toronto. So they had that as a role model of, you can get there from here. You can make a Canadian sketch comedy show. So the Kids in the Hall did that. So I thought, well, why don't I go back and do the book about the sketch Second City Television? Why don't I do that? And at that very moment, this is 3.5, maybe 4 years ago, Martin Scorsese was making, at the time, what we thought was an imminent documentary about Second City Television. They'd done a live interview with Jimmy Kimmel on stage in Toronto somewhere, and it was in the can. And I thought, okay, it's going to come out any day. So let's not do an SCTV book because all the energy will be gone. Well, that film has yet to be released. But in the meantime, when I'm having this conversation with the publisher, I said, I don't think we should do SCTV then. And he said, well, why don't you just do John Candy? So my editor said that. He said, why don't you just do John Candy? Because then you could talk about all the great movies. And also people all over the world know the movies. They might not know Second City Television. So thinking a little bit like a businessman, I think he realized that the exportability of a book about John Candy was greater than perhaps just about SCTV. Anyhow, whatever it was, I went, my God, that's awesome. Can I do that? And they said, yeah, I'm telling you, I'm asking you to do it. And I said, okay, let's do it. So then it began a process of making all you can see I have a wall behind me, but when I'm working, I'll have a whole chunk of like pieces of paper and, like it looks like a conspiracy theorist board, like red string connecting things. And it's basically timelines and all that. And so then I have a wish list of interviews. And my wish list was people like Steve Martin, Martin Short, Catherine O'Hara, Dan Aykroyd, Dave Thomas, and Joe Flaherty from Second City, but also Ron Howard, who directed Splash, Tom Hanks, who was in Splash. Obviously, John Hughes had passed away, but I got in touch with John Hughes' family. One of the guys who runs the organization is James Hughes, his son, and he was super useful. So I got most of the people I wanted, which is really amazing because once that happens, there's a whole other fun parts of this book is like when you just get off the phone with Steve Martin and he gave you everything you wanted and more. It was, the smart Steve, not the wild and crazy Steve, the smart Steve that knows everything is like super awesome to talk to. And then there's Martin Short, who is like as nice as you would think. And he's also very literate. Like he can explain things in a very intelligent way. And it's so gratifying to interview these people. And Catherine O'Hara, like a childhood crush.
Yeah.
And she's like done all these great things since, like Schitt's Creek and all those Christopher Guest movies. And she's still one of my comedy heroes. And I get off the phone with her. It was actually a Zoom. And I was like, I had to text my brothers, it was like, you know what I mean? So so that was really exciting.
Was there something that you discovered about John Candy that you did not know?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One was that he was an actor first. I mentioned his emotional intelligence. He had it in him to be a great actor. And when he started out in the Toronto theater community, he was doing a lot of plays that were like avant-garde plays and things like that weren't comedy. And then he got to know some of the other people in the Toronto theater community, including Dan Aykroyd and Valerie Bromfield, who had just moved from Ottawa, Canada, to be part of the Toronto scene. And he started hanging out with the Toronto cast of Godspell, who were, at the time was Eugene Levy and Andrea Martin and Martin Short. And they were all hanging out at this house in Toronto, like a frat house in Toronto that they all rented. It was just a scene where they were all just sort of social. It was just like a salon of future stars of comedy. And Paul Schaefer was there too.
And Gilda Radner.
Yeah. And they all used to do sketches. They'd make up radio plays on a little tape recorder. And John Candy was in that environment. So one day, the Chicago Second City announced that they were going to start a Toronto troupe. And then Dan Aykroyd said, we're all going to audition. And John Candy said, I don't think I want to do comedy. And he said, well, come to the audition with us. We're all going to go to lunch after. So they kind of tricked him because Aykroyd puts his name in the hat and he gets picked. But he gets picked to go to Chicago Second City to learn more about comedy, where he's suddenly in a troupe with another first-timer named Bill Murray. And Bill Murray and John Candy learn the ropes together, and Candy learns about living in Chicago, and he's never been outside of Toronto before. To me, it's a very exciting moment just as a movie, that's his like the Beatles going to Hamburg moment. And so I think that's really cool. But he could have been a theater actor if he hadn't been so damn good at comedy. But he brought that to it. And you start to look at the lens of all his comedy roles, you realize he's always been a great actor, even in broad comedy. So when he's doing, notably, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles has some incredible reveals of the Del Griffith character towards the end of the movie. You're like, wow, not every actor could have done that. And also Uncle Buck has moments of gravitas and tenderness, and Cool Runnings, where he plays the disgraced coach of the Jamaican bobsled team. And he has that speech about winning the gold medal. If you don't already love yourself, a gold medal is not going to help you. This really serious moments, and Only the Lonely, and he does a great turn in JFK. So learning that he was a great actor and that he always was reframed Candy for me. It made me realize he's not just looking for laughs. He's looking for like the folly and the sadness, like the funniness and the sadness. It's like those two masks of theater. And he had them both. So that was a great discovery for me.
In the book, you mentioned he was friends with Gary Oldman. They were talking about doing a production of Macbeth, and like John Candy and a Shakespeare. I mean, it doesn't sound like it would make sense, but after reading your book, like, oh yeah, you know what? That could have been amazing.
Watch how he plays Orson Welles on Second City television. He did a parody of Orson Welles, the larger Orson Welles towards the end, the wine pitchman version, not the young svelte Citizen Kane version. He could have had the role of Falstaff in Shakespeare. I think that's what Gary Oldman saw in him, because Oldman and him weren't in scenes together, as I recall, in JFK, but they were on the set together. Yeah. They were around in the New Orleans shoot, because Oldman played Lee Harvey Oswald, right? So, and Candy was playing Dean Andrews Jr. And Oliver Stone, the director, commented at the time that the dedication that Candy brought to what is essentially a small part in the movie, he worked with a dialect coach to get to the exact region of New Orleans on the accent. Like, he wanted to have a perfect Cajun accent. But he also, there's this character, the character has this thing where he's supposed to be both threatening Kevin Costner's character, but he's also afraid. So somebody who is both menacing and afraid himself. Not being an actor, I can't believe you can dial those things in if you're a really good actor. And Candy did it, and Oldman noticed it, you know?
That makes me think of the character Johnny LaRue, who would be threatening Guy Caballero, like, no, we're not going to do that, Johnny. And then he would just like break down, like, please, Mr. Caballero, you know, like he'd cave instantly, like just these emotions from one emotion to the other. Like, I mean, that was just brilliant. Every time I watch that, like, oh my God, it's the best. Such joy.
Yeah, Johnny LaRue is such an extension of what John Candy was, but also he added characteristics that he saw in others. And again, he wasn't punching down, but he saw people who were trying to be too big for their britches. You know, the analogy I always use lately is, if you know the Gary Shandling show, the Larry Sanders Show, there's a Hank Kingsley, you know, Jeffrey Tambor's character. Hank Kingsley was always trying to act like he was a big shot, but we all knew he wasn't.
Yeah.
We all knew he wasn't. He was the last person to know that he wasn't a big shot. And Johnny LaRue had that same sort of pumped up arrogance.
Yeah.
But then you felt for him. That's what John Candy did. He made you go, oh, poor Johnny. He wanted a crane shot and they gave him street beef instead. He has to go out on the street with one microphone. And then at his lowest moment, if you've seen this SCTV arc, they build up this whole thing about how he's having his budget demoted until he's like passing out on the street drunk. And all of a sudden gets a crane shot from Santa Claus. And it's like, or God, we never know. It's a disembodied voice that goes, here's your crane shot, Johnny. To put that in a sketch comedy TV series, like, it was so different than anything else. And Johnny LaRue still is a character that lives for me. Like, I still think of him as not John Candy. It's like somebody that existed in time.
I had never heard Johnny Toronto either, but this was what people called John Candy, is just because he was bigger than life. Like, he was the mayor of Toronto, or
so Johnny Toronto was, I think, it's either Joe Flaherty or Dan Aykroyd or somebody coined it, when back in the day when he wasn't even famous. John Candy would always do things like, if they were going to some kind of event, he would rent a limo, like you would for like a graduation or something. And he'd rent a limo, but they weren't making a lot of money as day-to-day actors. So he would spend money he didn't have just because he wanted to be magnanimous. He wanted to be big. And he would pick up the tab for everybody, even though they knew he didn't have the money. So he would take out of his own bank account and just, go broke. But he had the pleasure of having bought steak dinners for everybody in the cast. And he did that before the money was there. And then when the money was there, he still did it. So they used to call him Johnny Toronto. Look at Johnny Toronto. He owns this town. And they were kind of making fun, but at the same time kind of going, he acts like he owns this town. And in a weird way, I guess that means he does. So then when he buys the Toronto Argonauts of the Canadian Football League, he walks into the stadium and everyone knows that he spent his own money, part of his own money. He went 3 ways to buy the Toronto Argonauts. And he brought them the Grey Cup, which is the Super Bowl of Canada. And he walks through the stadium, and I think it's Dan Aykroyd or Dave Thomas who says to me that they turned to each other and said, look at him. He is Johnny Toronto. He is he is the beloved man, son of our hometown, who has now brought success and joy to the sports fans of Toronto. And he's like an emperor walking into the Coliseum. Like, everyone was like cheering him as he walked onto the field. Again, there's so many movie moments in this to be in the room. And that's what I tried to do in the book. I tried to sort of set the scene for who this guy was. So you kind of know some of what he's admitted about his interior monologue, because we'll never actually know. Yeah. But the stuff that he's been on record as saying and stuff that his friends said he said. So you get a sense of what it would have been like to sort of be in the rooms that he went through, these big moments in his life. And also why his death mattered, like why it was such a catastrophic thing for a lot of people when he passed away in 94. This was the fun part as a writer. I mean, also hard, but it's fun. It's rewarding is what it is. It's like, it's fun to put together, but it's also privileged to work with all these people telling you their stories. And so I'm very excited about it for that reason. I really am. This isn't just like promotional. Every day of my life now, I'm going to be remembering how much joy this thing brought me,
We are talking with Paul Myers. We're having a good time, so it's time to Mambo, but we will return right after our little break here. Let's do a Mambo break.
To truly experience your favorite album, you need to hear it exactly the way the artist intended, on vinyl. But you don't need a complicated setup to get that warm, high-fidelity sound. You just need the Andover Spin Duo. It combines a premium turntable and the spin-based speaker system into one seamless unit. There's no cheap plastic here, just pure audiophile quality sound that is incredibly easy to use out of the box. Finally, hear every note of the music that changed your life. Right now, the Spin Duo is on sale for Black Friday. Do your records justice at AndoverAudio.com.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Virtuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Virtuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration, and use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
We're back on the What Difference Does It Make podcast with our guest, Paul Myers.
So you did not have any connection with Colin Hanks' documentary. Was that going on at the same time? I mean, would Steve hang up the phone with you and then like, okay, let's start, and then Colin Hanks would start filming Steve Martin talking about the same things? Was it going on?
One day I'll find out. One day I'll find out just how much double door action there was in this hotel. like if people were going from room to room. But let me tell you this. So when I got the call to do, hey, you should do this book, and I was like, oh, let's do it. Yeah. First call I always make when I do, this is my 5th biography. First call I always make is to make sure I can get the principals to participate, because that makes it more first person and, from the horse's mouth. And in this case, I wanted to let the Candy family know that I'm not a gossip smear merchant writing the truth about John Candy. Like, I wasn't going to do that. So I emailed Jennifer Candy, who I sort of knew through some people. And you got to know that because of Mike being in Second City, there was, my brother had been in Second City. So there's a kind of mafia or whatever. We're all kind of, everyone who's in the world of those worlds. And I'm also kind of adjacent to the second Saturday Night Live world. So there, a lot of people know who I am just because Mike talks about me all the time. So I was lucky there. So Jennifer knew who I was, and she knew that I'd written this respectful book about the kids in the hall that she was a fan of. And so Jennifer said, we know you're going to do a great job. You're free to do whatever you're going to do. So that was kind of like, okay, that's nice. But we're making our own film, and we've been working on it. We have all our home movies and all our first person stuff that it's going to be kind of projecting who our dad was. So she basically said, my apologies, but herself and her brother Chris and their mother Rose were going to save themselves for this movie only. And I said, well, heartbreaking, but also glad to hear that you give me your blessings, and, let's watch each other's things when they come out. Then a few months later, I saw Ryan Reynolds on one of John's anniversaries of John's birthdays. He said, I want to make a documentary that shows you how much I love John Candy. And I thought, I bet he's working with the Candy family. Mm-hmm. So then, and then another year goes by, and I see Colin Hanks signs on to direct film for Ryan Reynolds about John Candy with the Candy family. And I was like, okay, so that's definitely it. I must say, Colin Hanks, as a director of documentaries, he made a great film about Tower Records called All Things Must Pass. One of my favorite, as a guy who does the Record Store Day podcast, I was very interested. So Colin Hanks did a great job with that. He also made a very serious film about the Bataclan terrorism incident that involved the group the Eagles of Death Metal in Paris. And that was a very serious film that was very moving. And I thought, Colin Hanks, he's a really great documentary filmmaker. So I thought, oh, good for the Candy family that not only is Ryan Reynolds putting his Maximum Effort company, that's what they call it, his company's called Maximum Effort, he's putting that on the resources of that towards this, but Colin Hanks is going to direct it, so it's going to be great. But I still had no idea when their thing was coming out. One more wrinkle to the story. So I guess it was about a year ago or early last year, my publishers say, okay, well, my book was almost ready. And they said, we're going to wait another year because the book was too long. And they said, we want you to condense some things and we have ideas and you need to lose about 100,000 words or something like that, 80,000 words. And I said, okay. And then I said, I'm not sure if I can make it fast enough. And they said, no. We're also going to like push it back to October 7th, 2025 will be our release date because John Candy's would have been 75 on October 31st. So we announce October 7th, this book is coming out. 3 months later, I see John Candy, I Like Me to premiere in September at the Toronto International Film Festival and that it goes to streaming October 10th, 3 days later from my book. Everyone thinks we did it on purpose.
The synergy.
But I will tell you that Ryan Reynolds' company, I don't know about Ryan, but Ryan Reynolds' company never responded to an interview request because I thought, if you're making this documentary, you should be in my book because, but I think sometimes people go, they don't want to cross the streams, like for intellectual copyright reasons. Maybe there's reasons that they wanted to make sure that they had never had any contact with me. And there's a big PS to this story, if you don't mind sitting through even a longer version
all
of this.
good.
But my book comes out. I'm on the road. Their film comes out. I'm about to go on the tour. My first date was Edmonton on October 14th. On October 10th, Ryan Reynolds had been out on the road promoting his film in different cities. And then get a call from a good friend of mine, Dan Pasternak, who says, Ryan wants to call you. And I thought, oh, am I in trouble? Like, I don't know what's going on here. So Ryan calls me, couldn't have been nicer. Nicest guy in the world. First he sends a video and then he phones me and he goes, hey, buddy, I just wanted to know, could you come out to Boston in 2 days because we're doing this thing with Stephen Page on stage and it's going to be a really nice thing. And we're all going to sing a song together and Stephen's going to sing. He actually said Stephen's going to sing and we're going to talk about Candy. And I said, oh, sure. I said, did you know I tried to reach you like before the book came out? And he goes, I didn't know. I don't know about that. But I saw that you have your book out and everyone says you're great. And Stephen's been talking about you and Chris Candy said he heard you're great. And it's like, whoa. So this like late validation. So my book tour was supposed to be October 14th in Edmonton. He says their show is the evening of October 13th in Boston. And I'm thinking I don't know if you remember, there's this big storm in Boston that week. You wouldn't remember, but I had to watch the flights getting canceled. I flew to Boston the night before, so October 12th. He put me in a nice hotel, first class flight, limousine. He did the whole thing. He got me there. But I said, I really need to get to Edmonton. So your event's the 13th. I have to fly out in the morning of the 14th to get to Edmonton for the evening. It's a ticketed event and it's sold out and I can't blow off Edmonton, She said, don't worry, buddy. We'll make it happen. I have an office there. They're really great. And he does. He is a top down. He's a nice guy and all the people who work for him are nice. And they're all like, we understand you have to get to Edmonton. We're going to make it happen. We're going to get you a first class this and blah, blah, blah. So I did the event in Boston. And it was like, it was just me and him on the couch at the beginning with Dan Pasternak interviewing us. And then Stephen comes out, he sings What a Good Boy, which is a song by the Barenaked Ladies, which Ryan identifies it as the song. He thinks it's about John Candy in his own mind. And everyone's crying. I'm singing along from the couch because having written the Barenaked Ladies book at the beginning of my career, I know this song very well. I know what it means to Stephen, too. It's kind of about himself. And then as a surprise to Ryan, Stephen turns and gets everyone off the couch, me and him and Dan, and we all sing If I Had $1 Million, which is a Barenaked Ladies song. And we all sing it with the audience, and the audience is encouraged to sing along too. And it's like this beautiful moment. Then I go back to the hotel, get up really early, 2 connecting flights, like one through Denver and then to Edmonton. With 2 hours to spare, I get to my hotel room, have a shower, and go out and start my book tour at 7:00 that night in Edmonton. And it's amazing. It's an amazing story. It's like planes, trains, and automobiles happen in real life, Glad I get to share that with you. Yeah. True story too. Like I didn't make up a note of that.
That's crazy. And that's nice to hear. And you do a great Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, thank you. Hey, buddy, here's the thing. We really need to, he has very strong C's when he talks in S's. Like, we're doing this stage thing and it's very, stage thing. It's like, yeah. And I was just talking to him yesterday and that's the other thing. Who would know that in 2025 you'd be in my Rolodex? It's nice. Again, the Candy brings everyone together, and it really is kind of about him and not about us.
That's wonderful. So many Canadians. All right. So we know the Barenaked Ladies. I discovered another Canadian band We're a radio music podcast. We can talk John Candy and music and radio, actually. But
I'll
there's
talk about anything you want.
Okay, tell me about. I discovered the band the Chili Wax. The song, My Girl. Candy did this Preteen World, and he's playing drums. So he is a trained drummer, right?
Well, no,
tell me about the Chili Wax and tell me about drumming.
Yeah. So the band is actually called Chilliwack.
Chilliwack. I'm sorry.
In British Columbia. No, but I can't remember now if they called the band on SCTV. I think they were called the Recess Monkeys.
That's right. Yes.
That's right. Yeah. But Chilliwack is actually the name of the band. So it's a little less silly than it sounds. Chilliwack plays in British Columbia. And so this band from Canada called Chilliwack had some hits in Canada, and their biggest international hit was My Girl, gone, 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 she's been gone so long, she's been gone, gone, gone for so long. And that's a perfect impression of it.
Yeah, it is.
And then, and so when they did it, like they were trying to show an adolescent band that didn't quite know how to play. So Rick Moranis, I think, is singing like, gone, 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 she's been gone so long. Like he has the gasp between words because he doesn't know how to breathe. Like singers know how to breathe. He was a kid. It required that John Candy could play the drums in a very rudimentary fashion, but he did love playing the drums, and he would often play the drums on set. And he had a drum kit. When he did a radio series, he did a syndicated radio show called Radio Candy, and he did it from a studio that he owned in Los Angeles at the time. And he had a drum booth in the studio. And one day, one of his guests was Levon Helm from the band. And so there's a great scene in the book where Chris Candy is getting drum lessons from Levon Helm. So Chris is his son. I think Chris still plays the drums, actually. So the drums were a very big part of it. And he also played, John also played the drums in the punk rock parody they did, which is an amazing thing you should look up online. I think it was Marty Short was the lead singer. And the band was called the Queen Haters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, the brilliance.
Because God Save the Queen was, God Save the Queen was the big Sex Pistols head at the time. And John Candy had a bald cap. He looked like he was, completely shaved head.
Occasionally that song will pop in my head.
Yeah.
Because, it's funny, but these were musicians. They were legitimate musicians. All of the SCTV guys, right? I think everyone in there.
Yeah, no, and in the Schmengi Brothers, the polka band, Eugene Levy and him, those instruments that they played, they actually played them in high school. So clarinet and accordion. In the book, Paul Schaefer makes a confession that when they played Letterman, Eugene and John lip-synced. They didn't actually play the instruments on stage, because they wanted to do the comedy. They wanted to, but the rest of the band was playing for real. It was nice though that they knew how to make the fingerings on the keyboard and on the clarinet, because they knew what they actually would have been doing. That's always important. Like Rick Moranis is also a huge music guy. So when he was doing SCTV, and I think, Dave Thomas, his brother Ian Thomas, is Canadian singer-songwriter legend. Like he's had hits on the radio, and so he often did music for Second City Television. So that's funny too, because my brother's Mike Myers and I'm a musician and writer, and so I have an affinity for these guys because Michael Short, Martin Short's brother, was a writer on Second City and also worked on all these other shows like Schitt's Creek. And Joe Flaherty's brother, Paul Flaherty, directed Who's Harry Crumb. So like Catherine O'Hara's sister, Mary Margaret O'Hara, is a great Canadian singer-songwriter. So there's a feeling of maybe it's a Canadian thing, but we have family connections in all these things. And so I have an affinity for these people because I understand you can use someone from your family who's actually talented. It's not just nepotism.
Something in the water in Canada. I don't know what it is, but
yeah, I think it's lead.
Oh, lead. Oh, okay. Oh, nice. Okay.
It's part chromium. I know that. But, we need to figure out what it is in the water.
I thought it was the maple syrup or something. Like it's in the water. There's some
maple syrup.
Yeah,
you're right. It's the maple syrup and the Tim Hortons coffee residue.
Always fresh. Yeah.
From empty cups. Yeah. Always fresh. Always fresh in some way.
In some way. Okay. In quote. Yeah.
I loved the book, by the way.
Thank you.
It seemed like most of the people you interviewed were aware of some heaviness within him.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fair to say. I mean,
I can speak to that if you want. So what it is he was a people pleaser, and he really wanted to make people feel, he loved hearing laughter in his presence. So if he was hurt or feeling, belittled or, made fun of for his weight, or if somebody was giving him hassle, he would find a way to bring humor into the situation. A lot of funny people do this. Humor is a street fighting tactic. If you can make them laugh, they drop their weapons. On the other hand, he also internalized rather than deal with it. So it was a little bit of negation, as they call it in therapy terms. He wasn't giving value to his own pain at those moments, but it went somewhere. You know, the body keeps score is the phrase people use.
Yeah.
And I think he was internalizing a lot of stress, and the constant people pleasing also became a source of later anxiety because he didn't know how to stop himself from signing autographs for 2 hours. When he became super famous and being a very large man, he was identifiable in a mall. Like you would see him from a mile away in the mall. His head would be above everyone. And so there's a scene in the book where he's in Calgary filming the film Cool Runnings. And he decides to go out and get Christmas presents for his kids because he has the morning off and he's going to shoot a night shoot or something. And he goes to the mall and he has a security guard who's a former Toronto Argonaut, which is a fascinating detail that he owned the team and he used some of them as bodyguards, you know. And he's in the mall and the guy tells the story about how at a certain point he could see Candy starting to sweat and look like he was spinning, like he looked like he was going to pass out, and he knew he had to get him out. And he basically intervenes and says, John has to go, John has to go, John has to go. And he gets him in the car and John loosens his tie and he's just like, you could tell that like he was going to pass out. They get him back to the hotel and everything's fine. He drinks some water, you know, there's all that stuff that he recovered. But there was a moment there where you saw it. And there's another scene in the book where he's at the Toronto Argonauts home turf, that's then called the Sky Dome. And he barely makes it back to his private box because they had to walk him out of the crowd because he was shaking hands and loving it. But, you know, it was a sea of people and he's engaging with every one of them. And so to stop him from himself, he would have people then he'd say to people, you have to come and get me because I won't be able to say no. And that's something else I've seen in a lot of celebrities is at a certain point, they want to stay authentic, but they know that the time doesn't allow it. So they basically find a way to have somebody come and get them out. Let them be the bad guy. And that's the job. Your job is to be my bad guy. I'm lucky I have a wife who does that. No, my wife, Lisa, knows when it's time to leave and like if we're going to miss our flight. So she'll I don't have half the workload that John Candy had, by the way. I'm just saying, if somebody's on the street, friend of mine, and I'll be like talking about old times and she's like, Paul, you don't have time for this. You know, like, and you need somebody to do that for you sometimes. The other one was the body shaming. This man endured like an interview much like this. Imagine if you open with, Paul, I noticed that you've got like white hair. You're looking kind of old. What's it like for you writing a book at this old age, looking so horribly old? And I would be like, why are you leading with that? Like, and so John got that with his weight. John would be like, hey, you're a fat guy. Why are you the lead and only the lonely? Do you think you would honestly get that girl? And like, he has to sit there and listen to that. Like, and I think body shaming as a term, I don't think we even knew it in the 80s. Like, I don't think people made that concession to the fact is they still body shame people, and women especially, but it's tragic how much he had to endure.
We were talking about John Candy, just like, you know, his stress, but his oasis was his home. Is this still a Candy home? Do they still live there? And and what was,
as far as I know.
Have you been there, or what is so special? What was special about this place?
Never been there.
Okay.
Well, you're talking about the place in Queensville, Ontario, Canada.
Yeah, correct.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, so he bought a farm. And there's a great segment, I quote in the book, where he first bought the place. I guess the water under the land was like almost a swamp. So around the grounds, there was these depressions in the ground where it would fill up with water and just stay there. So they had to really do a lot of reno. After they bought the house, they figured it out. And there's like a farm in the back that he converted into a garage because he actually bought a few cars and kept a few cars that he owned. It was so not Hollywood. It was so, he owned a place in Brentwood that was kind of their work home, but they all kind of spent a lot of time there. And I think they still have all these properties. Like the family still has them. But when he could, they would come home for Christmas. I think the kids had gotten spoiled by the lack of snow and didn't always like going back in the winter, apparently. But they would come back in the summer and it was, you know, amazing.
So where is this location in Canada?
I think it's about 40 to 60 miles northeast of Toronto, which is weird because it's also near where he was actually born, was a town called Newmarket, Ontario, which is, like an hour and a half drive north of Toronto, maybe 2 hours. It's funny that a lot of Canadian celebrities end up buying properties in rural communities and also like the Muskoka Lakes, Martin Short. I think Ryan Reynolds has a property somewhere in Ontario. You can take the boy out of Canada, but you can't take Canada out of the boy, you know? And I think that he always maintained that, which is why he had 2 funerals, right? Like, so he had like an LA funeral that was attended by all his LA friends and Dan Aykroyd, who was living there. And then he had a Toronto funeral, which was, Catherine O'Hara spoke at that, and it was beautiful. And Mary Margaret O'Hara sang at that. And that was on national television in Canada, which is such a tribute to how important he was, that he had a state funeral. And so I think maintaining that property in Queensville was a big part of that, you know. And Aykroyd's eulogy at the funeral, he's such an academic in his own way. Aykroyd, he really said in an almost epic Homer kind of Odyssey kind of way. And just also, I loved making the analogy in my head that comedians' funerals are often very funny, because one of the gifts that they give in life is to make you laugh, so that when they die, you're sad, but you remember how much they made you laugh. So everyone uses humor the same way too. Like, it's a way of sometimes processing grief. So Candy's funeral is beautiful in its sadness. It's just a beautiful story.
I do love that you included the Dan Aykroyd speech in the book. The speech isn't it displayed somewhere?
Yeah, it's at the Margaret Herrick Museum in Beverly Hills. Yeah, I didn't go there. A good acquaintance of mine who was going there made a screenshot of it, because you're allowed to do that.
Oh,
and
okay.
He sent me the screenshot because Aykroyd said he didn't have a copy of it at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was interesting. And I believe Aykroyd, because he obviously wrote my foreword. He's not gonna lie to me. But when I got the thing, I actually called the museum and said, do I need to clear this with it? Aykroyd said I could use it if I could find it. And they said, only if you use that picture. If you use that picture of that item, because the actual item is displayed, I have the picture at home. So I transcribed it. And then they said, oh, you can use the words. You just can't show the picture, because you'd have to come to the museum to get it, and you'd have to clear the image. It was actually better that way, because I could also fold it out. And I don't know if you remember, I quote parts of it, and then I cut to other things that were happening and then go back to it. So I think of it like being a film director. You know, you're cutting to this and cutting to that. And actually, it's funny. I realized that writing books for me, the narrative part of it, once you've got all the research, you're trying to like tell the story visually. You're trying to set up the scene, and then the quotes come in. And so sometimes I've rewritten what they said, like in my own voice, because if you just use the literal, it's just boring after a while if it's just quote, quote, quote. So then I like to be able to sort of move the narrative along and say, and then Aykroyd's voice changes when he mentions the blah, blah, blah. Because I'm trying to like let you know what it was like to hear him say it. So maybe I'm a director.
Setting yourself up for the next step of filmmaking.
I love film. That's the thing. I think that part of the reason I'm a musician, and I think I love creative arts, and I love the way things flow. I love the work that goes into making something seem easy. That's always been a fascinating thing. So I think even as I'm doing a creative pursuit of writing about creative pursuits, I find myself getting egged on by the people I'm writing about. You know, like you can tell by the way I'm smiling. It's something that I think is an unexpected, beautiful thing about what I do.
Well, having been doing this podcast for a long time and talking to authors and filmmakers, I appreciate much more how much work. That's what fascinated me. As much as reading about John Candy and reading your words, the whole idea of what goes into this and how long, that's what, when you say 3.5 years, I believe that, how intense the labor is on a project like this. So I appreciate that, I think, much more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's nice of you to say.
Mm.
Just going to switch gears because, I mean, you are on our Black Friday episode, so congratulations. A lot of people are vying to get on the Black Friday episode. Record Store Day, Black Friday. You're like the mayor. You're not Johnny Toronto.
R.S.E. Myers?
Yeah, you're not Johnny Toronto.
No, I'm Johnny Record Store Day.
Yeah, okay.
Johnny Record Store
Johnny
Day.
Record Store Day.
I am the voice of the Record Store Day podcast. Yes.
There you go.
Yes, I am the host, and RSD Black Friday is a very one of two main religious holidays for the Record Store Day community. April being the actual original Record Store Day, and then they started adding the Black Friday one later in the year. Do people know this about Record Store Day? It's actually a company that is a consortium of independent record retailers, physical retailers. So everybody who has Record Store Day releases at their stores, they're official authorized releases that are made exclusively for Record Store Day, the organization, and people are members of that organization sell them. They also have an official retailer for anything that's left over after the in-person events, because the events are meant to drive people into record stores. Back when it looked like they were dying out, these people put together this organization, Michael Kurtz, Kerry Colleton, they put together this organization as a kind of a union, if you will, like a community of record store days that were needed to have reasons for people to come into record stores who hadn't remembered to in a long time, you know? And things have changed over the years. So now there are more vinyl and CD releases coming out than there ever were before. And Record Store Day is just still a great way to celebrate that. But, the show is on every week. The Record Store Day podcast is every week of the year, there's an episode, and I do them from this studio. And I get to talk to people mostly through Zoom, like you're doing here. And because of that, we get to talk to people who are in their hotel in Phoenix or in London, England, or usually we try to be topical, but we've had a lot of archival guests, people from, legacy artists like Steve Perry. But we also had, I just did an interview with the Beths from New Zealand, who are a contemporary band.
Love them.
Yeah, they're great. Oh, so Elizabeth was on, and we haven't put that up yet, actually.
Oh.
And, my favorite band from Canada, Sloan, we're just on this week's episode at the time we're recording this. And I think for the Record Store Day Black Friday episodes, I have Chris France from Talking Heads. They have a vintage Talking Heads demo album coming out on Black Friday. Also, Zev Feldman, who's known as the Jazz Detective.
Love him.
Is talking
Big
about
fan.
all his... Oh, yeah. Yeah. And he's got he also has a hardcore punk album this year of Bad Brains, the group from DC. And as well as jazz releases from Bill Evans and Rahsaan Roland Kirk. And it's really fun to talk to different people in different forms of music. I've had jazz artists, I've had, blues artists, and we try really hard to get a lot of different kinds of people and different ages and different ethnicities. And it's really fun. It's really, like you were saying, Holly, that you get inspired by all these stories about how people manage to still make something creative after all the stuff they had to do to get there. And it's a lot of respect for the artist,
Okay, I'm going to ask you specifically. You mentioned New Zealand, but you have spoken to Neil Finn a couple of times.
Okay, for one thing, if you don't mind my long-winded stories,
go
but
ahead.
I just want to say that first, before I say this, Elizabeth is from New Zealand. Elizabeth from the Beths, they're from New Zealand. And I said to her later in the conversation, I said, I didn't want to lead with this because I'm sure you get this all the time, but you're from New Zealand and you write melodic songs that are very catchy and inventive. And I said, so I just got to wonder, is Neil Finn your national hero? And Liam Finn plays on one of the tracks on the Beth's new album. And it was she said, oh, of course, he's the guy locally who also supports local music and all that stuff. He's he has a studio, he records all these bands, he manages, or his company signed some bands that were local. And as a Canadian, if someone says, do you know blah, 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 have you met Avril Lavigne? Or I have never met Avril Lavigne, or Justin Bieber for that, or Drake for that matter. But anyway, so she said, no, that's a perfectly good question. But Holly, I wanted to tell you how I met Neil Finn. So years and years ago, I was a fan of Split Enz, obviously. They were on the ABC show Fridays, which was their Saturday Night Live knockoff. And they did I Got You, which was a big hit. I love that song. As a songwriter myself, that was one of the great songs. It had punk energy, but it had Beatle energy. And it was just amazing. So I knew the song. I played the song in cover bands. And so Crowded House's first album comes out. They're supposed to play opening for Bruce Hornsby and the Range at Toronto's Massey Hall. Bruce Hornsby's on such a big tour that he loses his voice because he's never had to do this many dates in a row. So the show gets canceled. Crowded House are in Toronto. They don't have a venue. So they hastily put together a show at the Diamond Club across town. I go to this show because I am a big fan of Neil Finn and Crowded House. I just bought the Crowded House album and it just come out. And I was like, oh my God. Now I get to see them. I like Bruce Hornsby, but I wasn't going to go to this show that was a big ticket show just to see the opening act. But then suddenly it was their own show, and I went. And at one point in the show, I guess they only had one album out, so they didn't have a lot of other material. So they were going to do other songs, but they did this thing. I don't know if you remember, the original Crowded House were very interactive. They would take suggestions from the audience. So at one point, he says, who wants to hear anything? What do you want to hear? And I yelled, I Got You. Play I Got You. And Neil doesn't know me. He just points down and he goes, well, if you like it so much, you have to come up and sing it. Now, lucky me, I had a band and I knew what key it was in and I could sing it. But I also knew that Tim Finn's voice on the chorus of that song is really high when he goes, I don't know, sometimes. But I could do the, I got you, that's all I want. And so I got up and I said, you guys play it in D? And they laughed because it is in D. And that whole of I want to make sure we got the right key, buddy. I'm in
the club.
They knew I was a live wire. They knew I was going to be okay. And I knew I was going to have a hard time on the chorus. So as the chorus is approaching, I started doing it, by the way, and I'm, in my own opinion, nailing it. I'm doing great. And they could see the looks on their faces. Like Nick Seymour, the bass player, is like, oh, we've got one. We've got a guy who knows it. And then the chorus is coming up. So I motioned to Neil to come over and get the mic. And I said, you take the chorus. So he does it because he wrote the song anyway. But so he does it. And then I leave the stage. I bow to the audience, turn to the band and thank them. And I think I remember stage diving. I didn't stage dive, but I kind of jumped down. It was like only about 4 feet. I jumped down and actually kind of almost hurt my knees. But I jumped down and walked to the back of the club. And I thought, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. You don't stay until you screw it up. Nail the first verse and chorus and get the hell out of there. And then someone else came up and did 6 months in a leaky boat. And frankly, they weren't very good. And so after the show, I wait around like a stage door Johnny. Neil's wearing a John Lennon t-shirt and he comes out to sign things and say hi. And somebody else was talking to him wearing an XTC t-shirt, a band I really love too. And I knew I was in the right place. And I started talking to him and we talked about music and about Lennon and about XTC and about Split Ends. And I was like, oh, in those days we didn't exchange phone numbers or anything. But then I became a journalist shortly after that. And Crowded House were playing in Toronto doing a show. And then I'd arranged to be the guy interviewing Nick and Neil after the show the next day at the hotel. And I told them I'm the guy who was on that first tour. And they went, oh, yeah, Paul, that's right. And then cut to a few years later, I go to Los Angeles to visit my brother Mike, who was living there at the time. And there's this club called Largo, which was famous for musicians.
Still is.
Yeah. And the old club on Fairfax was it was like right across from Cantor's.
Yes.
I get an email from Flanagan, who runs the place, and he says, I saw that you were in Los Angeles. Do you want to come to see Neil Finn tonight? He's playing a show and with John Bryan. And I was like, oh yeah, for sure. So I go and I say to Mike, you want to come? So Mike's well known. So we go in the back door and we get in through the kitchen. And Neil remembers me and they invited us up and the whole Neil Finn family are upstairs. Sharon and the kids, Liam and Elroy. I think it was my birthday too or something. It was one of those things where, I have a Polaroid somewhere where Neil signed it, to Paul on his birthday. And then over the years, we just got more and more to the point where now I email him and say, I see you're playing Oakland. Is any chance you could squeeze me in? And he goes, always welcome, Paul. It's like, so I love that I know this guy, but mainly because he's one of my heroes.
Yeah.
So I'm bragging, I suppose, but it was like, I don't know if it matters to everyone else. Like a cab driver might not even know who Neil Finn is, but for me, he's like one of the gods of songwriting, and he's a super nice guy and the whole family are amazing. And Liam's an incredible songwriter. And thank you for letting an old man rant about the Finn family. But that's I love Neil Finn so much.
Well, okay, because it's the Black Friday episode and, it's shopping, everyone's shopping. Tell me about the books, the podcast, the future. This is your plug. Go ahead and plug away. What do we got?
Record Store Day is November 28th, which is, of course, Black Friday. So that you should go out there, go to recordstoreday.com to get the complete list of what's available on Record Store Day, Black Friday. You can always find the Record Store Day podcast wherever you get podcasts, frankly. There's too many places to name at once, but just look up the Record Store Day podcast with Paul Myers and figure out the format that's good for you. And Paul Myers is Myers. And there's the list. And the book is available in hardback still. There are many signed copies in different bookstores of the world. And if I'm coming to your town, I will sign it. But the book is John Candy, A Life in Comedy from House of Anansi Press. Oh, there's an audiobook that you can get as well. I didn't read it this time, which is kind of weird considering what we're talking about. I could have done a whole Will Arnett voice for the thing. But it worked out that the company that they were selling it to, they sold the rights to do the audiobook to another company. And they said, well, if you can get here, you can do it yourself. But otherwise, we'll just have one of our guys do it. And so I got them to negotiate with me that they would let me hear the person they chose. And I approved. So that's okay. But anyway, I wish I'd done it, but whatever. Follow me, pull my ears on most social media, PULMYEARS on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, all those things. I started blogging the Paul Myers Overshare on Substack. And it's called the Overshare for whatever reason you can imagine. I wanted to stop giving away my life stories on Facebook. Why should Meta own my content? So I decided to make a Substack that you could subscribe to for free and you can pay if you want. There's if you think that I need to make a living, you can help me out. And that's Paul Myers Overshare on Substack. And on that Substack lately, I've been writing about how I've rekindled my ability to write songs, and to the point where I can't wait to make a record. So I'm just showing people the demos every so often lately.
Oh, we should say thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. This was so wonderful. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was really nice to see you.
It's really fun to talk to you. Yeah, it's always fun to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I love to hear that. Yay, Paul loves us.
Thank you, Paul. I feel like he should be a regular.
Not
irregular. I don't feel like he should be irregular. I feel like he should be a regular guest on our podcast. He's so great to talk to.
He's a busy guy. He's got things a brewing. He's got his podcast, and he's got ideas that apparently you're giving him on his next project. So he's open. He's open to anything. So, yeah.
And he's got that creative mind. It seems like it's always going. Good on him. We can be the beneficiaries of his creative mind.
Yeah, we just feed him stuff and then he runs with it. We're the big picture. We give him one idea and then he deals with the details.
He executes.
There you go. We're the big idea people. That's what we do here.
Learned a lot about John Candy, learned a lot about Paul Myers and Record Store Day, and we have a few people to thank as well.
Yeah, well, I want to thank John Candy, first of all, because as a kid growing up watching John Candy, it was just influenced my humor. Whenever he was in a movie, there would be something of interest in there. So thank you, John Candy. Thank you to Paul Myers, of course, was wonderful, as always, on the podcast. Who else can we thank?
We should also thank Melissa Shirley and Emma Rhodes from House of Anansi Press, who connected us once again with Paul Myers. And, of course, thank you to Pantheon Podcasts. And by the way, might I add that I think you, Dave Sloan, have given me an even greater appreciation for John Candy. I know you've been a fan, and I know you were a fan of sketch comedy and SCTV. You are a fan. And you've made me, I think, through your lens, I've come to appreciate it a lot more. So thank you for that.
I would highly recommend getting the book and doing a deep dive into SCTV, watching the movies, doing all that fun John Candy stuff, because he's still there. He lives on. I'm so happy for that.
Check us out on social media at WDDIM Podcast and on YouTube at What Difference Does It Make Podcast, where you will find clips and you can see how lovely and animated Paul Myers is. And then check us out on TikTok as well. And I don't know, what about our newsletter, Dave? Tell us something about that.
Okay, well, yeah, on the website, WDDIMpodcast.com, which stands for What Difference Does It Make Podcast.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. You could see all of our other episodes that you may have missed. So it's it's nice to visit and leave your email. We can send you something once a month, just a reminder of what we did the previous month. Sign up now. Do it. Doesn't hurt. Can't hurt. Right?
It can only enhance your life.
It will enhance your life. I think you'll be healthier and stronger, more vivacious, put some color in your cheeks, build strong bones. You'll have a good base. All right, let's wrap this up. Episodes every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe. So do that. So until next week, this is Dave.
This is Holly.
Check you later.
Over and out.
Hey everyone, Brian Slagle here, founder of Metal Blade Records. You know, I spent my whole entire life trying to make metal history, make metal better, and promote metal as much as I can. And now there's a brand new way for you to test your metal knowledge and relive those iconic moments. It's called Metal Mondays, the official metal trivia game from Metal Blade and Pantheon Media, and it's free to play right now. Every Monday, a new game drops. From Slayer, Supremacy, Death, Metal 101, 80s, Metal Blade Classics, and tons more. You'll battle it out on the leaderboards, win killer prizes, and even score some exclusive Metal Blade merch. So if you think you know your riffs, your legends, and your deep cuts, prove it. Download Hit Replay on the App Store or Google Play, or head to metalbladerecords.com/Metal Mondays and start playing today. Because in metal, there's no off days, only Metal Mondays. Metal Mondays. Play loud, play true, and play to win.